Premier, great to see you. Merry Christmas. Thanks for meeting with us.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. Nice to see you.
Before I talk about some heavier things, what is going on with Skate Canada? Frankly, they've got a lot of gall saying they're going to boycott Alberta. Tell me about it.
Well, I'll just say that Boxing Canada has not taken the same view and Curling Canada has not taken the same view. I think that they've taken the view that they want to make sure that girls and women have the opportunity to participate in sport without having to face athletes that were born male. I think that Skate Canada is going to find that they're on the wrong side of this issue. Even the IOC is talking about creating new rules. I guess we'll see them in the new year. And I think they should rescind their policy, because what it really should be about is creating an environment for girls and women to participate in sports safely and fairly.
Do you know if there's been any other reaction from other players? I mean, for example, has there been a move to have Skate Canada reconsider or to set up an alternative competitor to Skate Canada? Because, you know, they have a monopoly right now on who gets to go to the, you know, nationals and Olympics, but there could be a sex-segregated version of Skate Canada. I bet you it would get popularity in Alberta, Saskatchewan. You know, they should watch out what they're doing. They're getting involved in politics.
It's true. You know, I mean, we wanted to create options for everybody to participate. But the reason we have girls and women's divisions is because we recognize that girls and women have different levels of skill, agility, strength, endurance, and that's part of the reason why we have those categories. If there were no biological difference between men and women, we wouldn't have created girls and women categories in the first place. So I think that they are putting themselves at risk of having a competing organization. What I would like to see is what are the girls and women who are represented by that organization, what do they feel about it?
I'm going to guess that they're funded by the feds. I'm guessing this was an instruction by the feds to take a shot at you. I bet they didn't actually consult their own members or even their own board.
And it shouldn't be that way. The people who most matter in these circumstances are, how do the girls who are competing feeling? How are the women who are competing feeling? How do they feel if they're standing on a podium and somebody has won or just edged them out because they were a born male athlete? That's what we're concerned about. And so we'll watch to see how it goes. I've just been pleased to see that curling and boxing has not taken the same view. And we'll watch and see what the IOC thinks about all of this in the spring.
Right on. Hey, I want to ask you about some comments you gave earlier this week about immigration. And I remember your speech at the UCP convention a few weeks ago. When you talked about immigration, that was one of the largest responses from the crowd in applause. Tell me some of your latest ideas. You were thinking that newcomers maybe have a waiting period before they can get into social services. What are your ideas?
Well, I guess a couple things I'd say is that I think that the federal government destroyed the historic consensus we've always had in Canada. We used to have an enviable immigration system based on points, bringing in professionals, giving extra points for people who had degrees and could speak one of the official languages, and they blew that up. That we received a very large number of temporary workers, refugees, family reunification, international students, pretty much everyone but the economic migrants that had always been the source of its success. And we're seeing it. It has brought our public services almost to the brink of collapse. That's one of the challenges that we faced in our education system, is we went from having a stagnant enrollment in our system to having a net new 85,000 kids added, 96,000 of which speak English as a second language, or English language learners, which is double what we saw 3 years ago. It's put enormous pressure. People are seeing the pressure in being able to get a doctor or nurse practitioner. They're seeing a pressure on buying a house, getting rent. The price of everything is going up, and they're frustrated. When I was going around with the Alberta Next panel, we heard of parents and grandparents saying, my kid or my grandkid has applied for dozens of jobs, even at McDonald's and Tim Hortons, and can't get one. So what we have asked the federal government to do, and it looks like they're curtailing many of those programs. We've been supportive of the changes that they've made, particularly on the temporary foreign worker program. But the federal government's irresponsibility has put huge costs onto our taxpayers. And so what I've looked at in the UK, Keir Starmer, he's having this conversation about whether you have to work for 5 years before you are able to receive social services. I believe that's their current policy. They're talking about making a person wait 10 years. And so you should come to Alberta because you have a job. You should be a taxpayer first. And then if you want to stay and become a permanent resident, that's when you can bring in your wife and your kids, and you can start on the pathway to permanent citizenship. We believe that those who are not here in a permanent status should be treated like tourists. And as a tourist, you don't go to somebody else's country and say, pay for my child care, pay for my education, pay for my health care, pay for my long-term care, give me a pension. We have to get back to something approaching a consensus around immigration again. And so that's what we're going to be looking to Albertans to see if they want to give us a mandate to do that.
I think part of it is that people see obviously bogus refugees and bogus temporary foreign workers who are not specialists that we can't get, not seasonal crop pickers. Like, people see that all these different categories, the diploma mill, fake school students, I think part of it is people feel taken advantage of.
Completely.
I was talking to Michelle Garner-Rempel of the Federal Conservatives, who's their immigration critic, and I said to her, there's all these people who their visas have expired and they have not been asked to leave. I said, would you support mass deportations or remigration? And to my surprise, she said yes, even if the number's hundreds of thousands or perhaps millions. That word remigration, I've seen it used in the States. They're talking about it in the UK. Do you think that perhaps it's time that Canada say to those who have overstayed, time to go home? Well,
the first step is making sure that you're not bringing people here who don't have a job to come to. So I think that's one part of it. The second part is, for those who are here and have a job and have a pathway to permanent migration, let's just be compassionate and find those permanent residents, give them permanent residency status so they can start on that journey. But anyone who doesn't have a job, doesn't have prospects, absolutely, why would they stay? It's not good for them. It's not good for the taxpayer. It doesn't allow for them to have to be able to pay for the things that they're going to need to support themselves and their families. It seems to me that we've got to get back to the kind of system that works not only for us as the host country, but also for the person who's coming here. And I can tell you that I think that there's a lot of those newcomers, the immigrant citizens, who came the right way and did things properly and followed the rules. And I think they're just as frustrated to see that there have been a lot of rule breakers, and they want us to do something about it. So we'll find out. We're going to very likely put this to a vote in the new year, and we'll see what Albertans have to say about it.
And how would it go to a vote? Would there be a bill, for example, to restrict benefits? Is that what you mean? I'm
thinking of a referendum. I think that if we're going to do something as dramatic as assert our rights under Section 95 of the Constitution, that we need to get a mandate from the people.
That's incredible. Are there any other issues that you propose to put to a referendum?
We'll be making a decision as a cabinet and caucus next year about which ones they'll put forward. But I would say that immigration emerged as probably the number one issue that I heard about.
I'm going to make a prediction right now that gets at least 80% support.
Might, yeah. And some of our town halls, people started off feeling really concerned about what we were talking about initially, but as they heard the arguments, when we did a straw poll about whether people thought we should take more control over immigration, some of the rooms were unanimous.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want to be respectful of your time, but I think the big issue, and I know we talked about this a few weeks ago, was the Memorandum of Understanding, which is a funny word because it's not a contract, it's not an agreement, it's a plan to talk further. I'm talking about the proposed oil pipeline. Has there been any interest by potential investors, by oil companies who say, yeah, we'll take a slice of that? Because when I first looked at it, I thought, boy, I see the costs. And they're all front-end loaded. And boy, between the carbon capture and the industrial carbon tax, they're not making it easy.
Yeah.
Has there been any nibbles? Has anyone taken it up?
Well, I can tell you that when we started off, we wanted to get rid of the emissions cap because we knew that there was nobody who was going to invest in expanding production as long as that was hanging over their heads. In fact, businesses were talking about, will we have to shut in production by 2035? And the clean electricity regs, we had no one wanting to build natural gas power plants in Alberta, which is the bread and butter of our power grid. And so that was very alarming to us. So getting concessions on those two things have already had an immediate impact. We've already heard that Enbridge is talking about expanding their line. We've got Trans Mountain talking about expanding their line. We've got South Bow talking about how to use the Keystone assets to build a new pipeline to the U.S.
Does that look like it's going to move?
I think that the Americans really want it. All the conversations I've had with the U.S. is that they want to see more Canadian oil going down to the U.S. Gulf Coast.
I saw Donald Trump tweeting saying he wants to retake the oil companies that were nationalized by Hugo Chavez. So I think he's going to topple Venezuela. They're a competitor to Alberta.
They are. But I guess the way I look at it is we're a far more stable partner. Yeah. We do already have the existing lines. We're responsible for 4.5 million barrels a day, most of that going to the United States. A lot of it is the type of heavy oil that their refineries are tooled for. And so it seems to me like, why not work with the friend that you have that wants to work with you? And and that's the argument that we're making. We've got a lot of friends in the U.S. that are making that argument on our behalf. But it is also a demonstration of why we can't be reliant on a single trading partner. And it is why we've been talking about how we might get this bitumen pipeline to the Northwest BC coast. Every person I've spoke with over the last number of years, they said that's the one that got away. If of all of the projects that were being proposed at the time, the one that really made the most sense to do would have been Northern Gateway, maybe a different port. Maybe it makes more sense to have it at Port of Prince Rupert because it's more of a direct straight line to get to those Asian markets. But we feel that with the consortium we've got at the table, we've got every major pipeline company represented there, giving us the very best technical analysis. When we put forward our proposal, we'll have a better idea of the costs, we'll have a better idea of the Indigenous partnerships, and we'll have a better idea of what the pathway will be to get to a yes. And if it looks like it's on the major project list on that 2-year runway, I suspect we will have a proponent step forward at that time.
It's interesting to me to see the Premier of British Columbia almost pout when Nutrien, a company in Saskatchewan, decided to export its minerals through the United States rather than BC. He was sort of disappointed, and part of me thought, well, you were just going to probably oppose it anyways. And it reminded me that, there are other ways to get out. Yeah. And the Keystone XL is another way to get out, and you don't have to deal with the BC Premium, you don't have to deal with really out of control land claim issues, like there's some Indigenous title. I think, let me ask you this. Has there been anything from the Trump administration or the company that suggests they're willing to flip on Keystone XL? Because that was partly built, 800,000 barrels a day, and you don't have to deal with all those troublemakers on the West Coast.
Well, I can tell you that there are active conversations between South Bow and a partner in the U.S., and I think that that's the best way to do it, is that they can find a pipeline partner in the U.S., and I think that there's a lot of enthusiasm for that idea. And we should look at that as a win, too, because remember, we have something called the Alberta Petroleum Marketing Agency. We can actually do deals internationally ourselves by holding on to those barrels all the way down to the Gulf Coast and then selling them, whether it's gas to Poland or whether it's going through the Panama Canal and selling our bitumen to Asia. It's a longer route, but that's how the Americans sell theirs. Yeah. And so I think that we'd get an advantage, and it'd be better if we had a different route going through the Northwest BC coast. But I would also look at it as an interim measure if we were to get some of those other pipeline expansions built. And I think that would be a win for not just us, but for the entire country.
I know you got to run, but I got one last question for you. I was surprised last week to see an announcement of a project that I hadn't seen proposed, that hasn't gone through environmental regulations, that doesn't have a private sector, it's got public money. I'm talking about a train from liberal Montreal to liberal Ottawa. It's going to be this crazy white elephant, probably close to $100 billion, is my guess.
I think so.
And it was just, ta-da, we're going to do it, and no negotiation, and there's going to be government money. And I thought, Alberta gets MOUs and maybes and taxes and a lot of disparaging comments, even by, there's a lot of Liberal MPs who are trash talking the MOU, by the way. And then just, if you're a Liberal from Montreal and Ottawa, you get yourself this white elephant free gift. What do you make of that? What do you think of that?
I think they're two different things. I think that major projects should be revenue generating projects. I don't think that was going to be a revenue generating project.
Are you paying for this train?
Oh, now you've hit a sore spot. I mean, you have to look at it from Albertans' perspective, why the MOU is a good step, but not sufficient. We still send $26 billion more in tax revenue to Ottawa through various taxes.
Build trains, I guess.
Than they send back here, and we're still having deficits, which are really problematic for us. And meanwhile, you see not only equalization transfers to Quebec go up, but also these kinds of major projects. It's very frustrating for Western Canada, and it's very frustrating for Alberta in particular, which pays a lot of that bill. But it's also another reason why we've got to try to find a way to have Ottawa take less. What we really need in the country is for each level of government to have the tax revenue that they need to fund their social services, rather than this tax and transfer game, which we always know is going to be used for politics. So a little bit frustrating, but we've got our own passenger rail plan that's going to be coming out in the new year, and we hope to find some private sector proponents who are willing to build big pieces of it. And maybe we'll show the East how it's done.
Right on. Great to see you. Thanks for meeting with Rebel News. We always love to connect with you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Good to see you.